Most every pastor has their favorite first church story. And my dad and I, well, we're going to share ours today. Now, Dad, I've heard one of your favorites, and it's also one of my favorites. But I'm going to share mine first, if that's all right.
I want you to, because you have very little memory. You have no memory of my favorite. You weren't there. You were alive, but you weren't there. But I have distinct memories of your favorite.
Okay.
I was there for that one.
Yes,
Woohoo!
no, you were there. And these have become almost folklore in our family. So I
Yes.
can listen to your story and visualize it as if I was there. But you're right, I wasn't. But
Yes.
all right, so first church. We both had our deacons, the lone deacon, right? Mine was Herbie, yours was Merle.
Merle.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell a story about Herbie. He had more tattoos than teeth, but he was a very faithful servant, and he basically ran the church. So my first church was a mega church of 6 people, and it didn't have air conditioning when I got there, and they had just gotten rid of the outhouse. Now what's pretty amazing about Union Band Baptist Church, which love that church, they were so good to me, was it got Church of the Year award. Most
It
people
did.
don't know that. There was
It did.
there was an award given. Who who nominated us for the Church of the Year award?
The nominating committee was Amy Jordan at Lifeway.
I thought Amy might have had something to do with that.
Do you see her in the background? See, the
Yes.
audience can't see her. We see her in the production area. She said, "No, I did not. Don't you blame that one on me."
And before you listeners think that we're just making this up, we're really we're really not. There's an actual certificate at Union Baptist Church that's probably still hanging somewhere in the hallway that
Well,
says,
I think the CEO of Lifeway had the prerogative to name whatever church he wanted as Church of the Year. And for some reason, I decided that was the church. Now, we'd never had a Church of the Year at Lifeway before. Nobody really knew about it, but a few people at Union
I don't
Band
think
did.
you've had one since.
Oh
I
no,
think
no,
it's
not up to that
one.
one. You can't replace it after that one. But you continue.
Yeah, so I went to be the pastor there. I remember I very vividly remember handing them my resume that first Sunday because I knew they needed a pastor. Now at the time, I did not know. They had not had services in 2 years.
Yeah.
So I had no idea what I was getting into. There was no website. In fact, they didn't really have an address. They they gave me directions like it's past the gas station, go 3 miles, and then you'll see this gravel parking. So when I got there, I handed Herbie my resume. I put it in a Manila folder, and he just handed it right back. Didn't even look at it. He just says, "Well, we'll just hear how you preach." So I was there probably 4 or 5 months before they decided to call me his pastor. Um, and the way that the conversation went each week, for the most part, was, "Hey, do you want me to come back?" And Herbie saying, "Well, so far no one else has said they would come preach, so I guess we need you again next week." So two negatives made a positive. I was a terrible pastor, young, had no idea what I was doing, and they weren't exactly where they needed to be either as a church. But so the story goes like this. I will never forget when they finally called me as the pastor. Dad, do you remember this?
I will never forget. There has never been a search process or a time of questioning to match this in the history of Christianity or the church since 33 AD.
I would agree with you. So they only asked me 2 questions. It was just
You
2.
answered both of them wrong.
I did answer both of them wrongly. So, I was in the middle of my preaching, and just like any other Sunday, I had just finished leading music on the
Oh,
karaoke machine.
oh gosh, you
We
leading music is kind
we
of like me playing golf. It just didn't work.
I I'll never forget, I thought I was just there to preach that first Sunday. No, I was there to do everything, and it was an elderly congregation, so when they needed light bulbs changed in the chandeliers, guess who got to do it?
Yeah, yeah.
Me. When the room needed to be painted, guess who did it? Me. When when the attic needed to be cleaned out. I had some help with that one, but um, I will never forget them doing that big bonfire and us just throwing stuff out of the attic from the second story and just into
A
this
lot of
big bonfire.
icons.
Yeah, I asked them what we were throwing away, and they said, "Don't ask questions." And I said, "I'll stop asking questions." So anyway, middle of the service, Herbie just interrupts me, and Herbie had a very thick Kentucky drawl that was very hard to understand him. And for those of you who have ever lived in Kentucky, you talk like you have marbles in your mouth,
As I
and
recall out of that.
it's kind of like that.
Mhm.
My wife is from Kentucky, so sometimes I have to ask her to stop speaking in tongues, so that I can understand her. Anyway, so Herbie stood up and muttered something. I could tell it was a question, and he had said something to the degree of calling me as pastor. So I assumed that this was the moment that they were going to call me. And he asked me that first question, and I had no idea what he said. I felt like I was very much put on the spot because I was halfway through my sermon when he decided to go for a church vote. And so he muttered what he muttered, and I just said, I guessed. Herbie only asked yes or no questions, so I just said no. He got mad. He got so mad.
Now you're exaggerating a bit there.
Maybe hyperbole.
He got flustered. He
Flustered.
didn't get mad.
Flustered. You're right. You're right. Flustered.
Bring it back. Bring it back.
And so then, well, it's better when you speak in pastoral hyperbole. It makes the story better. I learned from you.
That.
I learned from
I
the
am
best.
there as your guard.
So then he asked the second question. And yes, he was flustered. And I couldn't understand him. So I figured, well, no was wrong the first time. So I'm going to say yes this time. And I would say that he was even more flustered with this answer because I didn't understand him. I just couldn't quite grasp what he was saying. So I turned to my wife, who it was the interpreter, because she spoke Kentucky.
That's biblical.
And I asked her, and she's just laughing. Well, she wasn't my wife at the time; she was my girlfriend, but now she's my wife. And I said, "What did he say?" And she informed me. She goes, "Well, the first question was, do you like fried chicken? And you said no. What's the problem?" And the second question,
that was not nearly as bad as the second one.
The second question was, do you chase women? And you said yes. And that, my friends, is a true story. I
am a testimony to it. I was there, and within the guardrails that he just presented it was right.
All right. So now you've got to tell what is my favorite of your first church stories. We have a few, and I love this one. So you got to tell yours.
Well, we have a few. I had done one funeral in my life, and I had done that about 2 months earlier, and it was my father's funeral. And obviously, the pastor was there. They guided me, and I didn't have to know a lot. So this was my first funeral as a pastor. Well, what do you do when you have to do a funeral as a pastor? You know, who are you going to call? Well, I go to the pastor's handbook. Pastor's handbook, written by Jim Henry, says, if you're doing a funeral, you need to go to the funeral home and ask them what some of the customs are in the area so that you can be aware of what is taking place there. I didn't get to go to the funeral home early. I got to go to the funeral home on the day of the funeral, but I did get there sufficiently early to ask the gentleman about their customs and traditions. And so I asked them, I said, okay, I've never done a funeral before. Mistake number one, telling them that. I understand that every place has customs and traditions that I need to follow. Mistake number two. Big mistake number three was saying, can you tell me some of those customs and traditions so that I can be appropriate for this funeral? And I should have caught the snickers or the expressions on their face, but naivete won over. And they said, now here's what you got to know. In this part of the country, we always have open casket. And when you are finished with your funeral message, the open casket will be behind you, and you need to turn around and kiss the deceased. Pause. They didn't crack a smile. Really? Oh, yeah. You will offend them greatly if you don't. Okay. I did the funeral message. I have no idea what to preach. Guess that's probably irrelevant right now.
No one remembers what you preached that day.
I had a closing prayer. I should have prayed for something else. And I turned around, and there was Martha, the late Martha. That was her name. And I turned around and I bent over toward her cheek. And I've got to say, I made a kissing sound. I was within a few millimeters, but I never did quite touch the pallid cheek. But I did get close, and I went like that. And I stood up and looked, and the family did not know what had happened. They were, I don't guess I should use the word mortified because that might be taken as the wrong metaphor. But my goodness, what did you do? And I'm looking at the back, and there are a few of these funeral directors laughing so hard that they can hardly stand up. Never ask jokesters if they are going to tell you how to do a funeral. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, there you go, listeners. You join us for Practical Church Leadership, right? So eat fried chicken, don't chase women, and don't kiss the corpse. That's your lesson for today. All right, we want to let you guys into our little community that we call Church Answers. There is a free 30-day trial of our silver membership. You've got to go check it out. Obviously, there's no risk. Just go see what we have to offer. churchanswers.com/free. We've got a link below. Also, like this video, hit subscribe, and tell us what's your favorite first church story. For those of you who are pastors or church leaders, we'd love to hear a little bit about what you have experienced. Have you ever had questions asked in the way that I did, or have you ever kissed a corpse? Or have you done something as crazy as these two knuckleheads that you see right here?
Yes.
So, by the way, just make sure you get that free 30-day trial. We've got a community of 1,800 church leaders. We'd love for you to be a part of that. Visit us at Church Answers, where we are growing healthy churches together.